Nothing physical though, nothing.
When we were having sex, I choked her, but it wasn't like killing her. It wasn't like that.
Hey guys, I'm Kevin and this is Just Thought Lounge, where I examine some particularly interesting and thought-provoking cases. In this video, we'll take a look at the case of Cayley Mandadi, the 19-year-old cheerleader from Texas who died under questionable circumstances. There are some descriptions and a couple of uncomfortable images ahead, so please be aware if you have a sensitivity to these details. But without further delay, Cayley was a 19-year-old sophomore at Trinity University in San Antonio, Texas. Cayley was studying communications in the autumn of 2017. She was a cheerleader and had joined a sorority. According to her friends and sorority sisters, Cayley had a big heart and her kind nature was matched by her intelligence. According to every person who knew her personally, Cayley was beautiful both inside and out. On the evening of the 29th of October, Cayley fell unconscious in a car traveling to Houston with her boyfriend, Mark Howerton, who was driving. Mark found that she was non-responsive and took her to Luling Hospital, where she was immediately life-flighted to another hospital in Kyle, Texas, for emergency treatment in a desperate attempt to save her life. Medical workers would do everything they could to revive Cayley. She was given CPR 7 times, breaking one of her ribs in the process. Although they knew it was a long shot, the emergency physician said that the medical team gave everything they could to resuscitate the 19-year-old Cayley, employing extraordinary efforts to revive her. It proved too late for intervention, however, and Cayley was determined to be effectively brain dead by the time of her arrival at the hospital. This diagnosis was confirmed the next day, on the 30th of October. Cayley was left on life support to donate vital organs towards life-saving procedures for others, but then 2 days after arriving at hospital, she was taken off the support and let go. 3 months later, the autopsy report reported that her body was covered in bruises and scratches from head to toe. The only areas of her body that were found to be free of injury was her back and the back of her legs. Her cause of death was deemed to be blunt force trauma to the face and head, which resulted in a large subdermal hepatoma that caused brain swelling. The report found no skull fractures, but injuries to her head, face, and mouth areas. On the weekend of the 28th and 29th of October, Cayley was attending the Malaluna Music Festival with Mark. On the second day of the music festival, Mark came to collect Cayley from her dorm room. He was driving to the event in his Mercedes with another friend. On the way to the festival, they stopped briefly and all took some MDMA, then they carried on. Cayley and Mark had also been drinking Crown Royal heavily. They continued their recreational drug use while at the festival. While partying at the festival, the couple was said to have encountered Cayley's ex-boyfriend, Jet Bersham. Mark was not happy about this. You see, it seems that Jet was maybe less of an ex-boyfriend than a current love interest for Cayley. The couple, Cayley and Mark, argued, and according to Jet, they continued a heated conversation while heading towards the Mercedes. According to Jet, Mark grabbed Cayley aggressively and led her towards the exit of the festival. On the ride home that evening, Cayley would fall unconscious and never wake up. So what's the deal with Mark Howerton? Mark was not a student at Trinity, unlike both Cayley and Jet. He lived in Houston, but was often on campus visiting friends. Apparently, Mark enjoyed hanging out on campus even when his friends were not there. One evening, as told by Cayley's roommate, she was invited out to a party with some friends. Mark had overheard the plans and was apparently furious and didn't want her to go out. Cayley's roommate saw an argument break out about this. The couple was on the balcony, and according to the roommate, while arguing over these plans, Mark threw Cayley up against the wall. She still went to the party. While Cayley was out, Mark hung back in her room. He remained angry. Students in the building heard noises, smashing, breaking glass, banging, and called campus security to check out what was going on. When security arrived, they found Mark alone in Cayley's room. He insisted there was nothing wrong and attempted to deny the security officers entry into the room. Since it was not his residence, however, this tactic was not successful. The dorm room was ransacked. The room was absolutely destroyed. Cayley's clothing was found hanging from trees outside, and her laptop was smashed in the street. Mark attempted to blame the damage on Cayley at first, but she wasn't even there. Damages were estimated to be over $1,400 in total, and Mark was charged with criminal mischief. In response, Trinity University eventually issued a criminal trespass warning that barred him from entering campus for a year. But, as we will see in the weeks that followed, this ban was not effectively enforced and appears to have done little to keep Cayley safe. Mark had a very minor criminal record. He was arrested for possession of a controlled substance a couple of years earlier in 2015 in connection with marijuana. But his behavior towards Cayley would raise the most red flags amongst those who knew and cared for her. Beyond the dorm room incident, Cayley's family also alleges that he stole Cayley's phone, cut off her contact with her friends, prevented her from participating in her sorority, and interrupted her time cheerleading. Another one of Cayley's roommates, her sorority sister Ariana, said she noticed bruises on Cayley's legs and asked her about it. The answer is, as you would guess at this point, Cayley said it was Mark that gave her the injuries. Cayley also said that 2 weeks before the Malaluna festival, Mark had slammed her head into the passenger window of his car. There's also one reported instance of him pulling a gun from the glove compartment of his car and threatening to shoot football players who were considering intervening on the abuse on Cayley's behalf. It's probably not surprising that Cayley reportedly shared her desire to be out of the relationship with Mark. They had known each other for about 8 months in total, but had only been seeing each other for about 4 weeks before attending the festival. Cayley's mother said the only boyfriend she was ever serious about, and the boy that she said she was in love with, was not Mark Howerton, but Jet Bersham. Jet was a fellow Trinity student. He was a football player and fraternity brother. They met in Cayley's first year at Trinity. The two had broken it off about 2 months prior. Cayley told her mother that she wasn't sure that Jet wanted a serious relationship, but that was definitely what she wanted, so they went their separate ways. According to Jet, who was still very much in contact with Cayley, she at one point claimed to be in love with both boys and felt pulled in 2 different directions. So I guess it's a good thing that Mark isn't the jealous type. In Jet's versions of the events, Cayley had reached the point that she wanted away from Mark. Having expressed these wishes, Mark apparently sent Cayley a Snapchat of him with the firing end of a pistol in his mouth, claiming that if she left him, he would commit suicide. These manipulative tactics were paying off in the short term. She wanted out but had been delaying. Jet said she planned to end things with him at the Malaluna festival on the 29th of October. She and Jet made plans to get back together. If it was Mark that caused Cayley's injuries and her death, he must have quite the temper. So, was Mark Howerton on steroids? To come to this conclusion, we will examine a few points of evidence. First, we look at images of him at the time. Second, if we need further confirmation, we can assess the first-hand testimony of Cayley's friends who said that Mark Howerton was most definitely on steroids. According to Cayley's sorority sister Dominique, she believed that Mark dealt and used anabolic steroids and that his roid rage was the reason that he trashed Cayley's dorm room. Multiple other sorority sisters echoed these statements. Mark's own friends said the same thing. Wyatt Stevenson said he bought anabolic steroids from Mark. Landon Suggs was a former friend and coworker of Mark's. Suggs said that he had also bought steroids from Mark and that he was aware Mark selling them to others at Trinity University. Suggs also said that when Mark was interviewed by police, he told him that he had successfully hidden his burner phone in a planter as to not be caught out, at least for his drug dealing. Mark Howerton was first interviewed by police at the hospital after bringing Cayley in. He is interviewed on 4 separate occasions by police. Over the course of these interviews, his story would change. Mark's initial story is that Cayley and him had makeup sex in his car while pulled over at a gas station on their way to Houston, to his house. He claimed the sex was rough, yes, but that this was not uncommon for them.
When we were having sex, I choked her, but it wasn't like killing. It wasn't like that. And afterwards,
Was she like that every time?
Yes, and afterwards, no, after we had sex, like she still talked to me for 5-6 minutes afterwards before we're like, all right, let's go. And then that's when she was like, I'm not feeling too good. But then she just passed out.
Later, Mark would say that they did not stop at the gas station, but rather a parking lot, and this is where they made up. The parking lot in question is nearly a 20-minute drive from the gas station where he initially stated they had stopped. Mark was arrested. The prosecutor at his trial argued that this change in location in his story indicated that this is exactly where the murder had taken place.
When y'all left the Valero, how long did it take for her to fall asleep?
She told me she wasn't feeling good, and I asked her, what was she feeling bad, and she just kind of like mumbled at me, and she's just like, and she just passed out. She started snoring though, like snoring hard for 30, 20, 25, 35 minutes. And then she just stopped snoring, and so I looked at her like, Cayley, Cayley. And I reached over and I felt her throat, and I didn't feel anything. That's when I started freaking out.
Mark Howerton's defense team would argue that the excessive bruising noted on Cayley's body was the result of the extraordinary measures taken by medical staff to save her life. While a nurse and EMT would testify that they saw Cayley arrive at the hospital from Mark's vehicle covered in bruises, there were 3 witnesses at the hospital that would say that the opposite was true, that Cayley was not covered in visible bruising when she first arrived. Mark rushed her to the hospital, unconscious. Murderers do not usually rush their victims to the hospital. He also repeatedly asked after her well-being while being interviewed by police. Is this in keeping with the typical behaviors of someone who has beaten their girlfriend to death? So what, if anything, explains the conflicting eyewitness accounts of Cayley's bruises? 3 witnesses stated they saw no fractures on Cayley's face when she arrived at the hospital. Some damage could have been caused by the medical emergency team's zealous efforts to revive her. We know, for example, that a rib was broken. In some cases, bruises can also be caused while attempting to revive someone who is unconscious. Further, Cayley was kept on life support for a longer period than necessary for treatment because she was an organ donor. The defense would argue that bruises can form after longer waits in the state while organ donations are arranged. They took a significant quantity of drugs while at the festival. An expert testified at trial that they took far more than would be required to reach a desired effect. In addition, this was coupled with large quantities of hard liquor. With these levels of substance in her system, the defense argued that even a minor head injury could lead to exaggerated swelling in the brain. These minor injuries can now be life-threatening. They could result in the hemorrhage that caused Cayley's death. Where the autopsy report makes clear that no skull fractures were apparent, a medical expert for the defense, a Dr. Anderson, who has apparently performed over 8,000 autopsies, says that there was in fact a minor skull fracture visible. The original pathologist testified to the contrary. She insisted there was no such fracture.
The defense questioned how someone could know the difference between bruises caused by trauma or Mandadi's treatment in the hospital. Dr. Dana says through her training and experience, she can tell.
And there's some bruising along there that's caused by the lip being forced against the teeth.
What my job is to document injuries. It is not my job to determine how they were inflicted or where they came from.
Here's where the prosecution's case at trial really unravels. We return to Jet, the ex-boyfriend. As you will recall, Jet had given a fairly damning account of the behavior he witnessed between Mark and Cayley the evening that she dies, as they were exiting the music festival. Ever possessive, Mark took Cayley under his arm and, with her visibly reluctant, led her to the exit.
As she's trying to step away, I see him reach out his right arm and hook it around her shoulder and pull her in closer, and then turn and walk away.
Jet's story, just like Mark's, also changed. This version of events, as initially told to the police, was then repeated to the grand jury and formed part of the reasoning behind Mark's indictment for murder. But he never actually saw Mark lead Cayley to the car this way. At trial, Jet admits that he lied about this detail. But that's not all. At the time that Cayley died, Jet was on probation for a drug charge. By the time that he takes the stand as a witness in Mark Howerton's murder trial, the defense, as well as the police, have taken notice of photos from his phone that reveals large quantities of marijuana. He is advised by his legal counsel that he is at threat of some serious drug charges if he is questioned under oath during a cross-examination about these photos and related activities. What happens as a result blows his credibility even further out of the water. In over 45 minutes of straight cross-examination by Mark Howerton's defense attorney, Jet, seated on the witness stand accompanied by his own legal counsel, takes the Fifth Amendment to prevent incriminating himself 30 times. What is baffling is that Jet had reached an agreement with the prosecution before trial to ensure his immunity against charges. He was free to testify and incriminate himself, presumably against these charges, but he still chose not to. Why would he choose to do that? After a few hours of jury deliberations, the defense counsel checked his voicemail. Strange and not ideal timing, it seems an administrative desk worker at the hospital in Luling, where Mark initially brought Cayley, had new information that could weigh heavily on the outcome of the trial. This new witness claimed that they saw Cayley when she first arrived with Mark, including her full, clear white and apparently uninjured legs. No bruises were visible. This witness offered that the EMT testimony was not quite right. Cayley was not covered in marks when Mark rushed her in for treatment. 10 additional hours of deliberations resulted in the jury returning a split decision.
All jurors have expressed their strong position and inability to change their position with the evidence provided. These decisions have been unwavering since the beginning of the deliberation.
The judge declared a mistrial. Reports later said that the votes were 8-4 to convict, but not one juror was budging on their position. Jurors refused to provide any more detail regarding their deliberations to the press after the trial. Prosecutors swear they will not give up. A retrial was initially scheduled for early August 2021, but as of now, these trial dates have not progressed. A series of filings for the defense is delaying any progress. Mark Howerton's defense now has evidence that Jet not only fibbed at trial when he changed his story, but cell phone towers and GPS data now suggest that Cayley and Mark were not at the music festival when his narrative of events took place. Mark's attorney said, "This isn't a case where we, the defense, had to go and independently dig up proof that the witness had lied. The cell phone data provided by the prosecutors contained all of the cell tower and GPS data necessary to show that Cayley's ex-boyfriend, Jet, could not have seen what he testified to seeing." What Jet saw set the stage for the prosecution's versions of events. Without this testimony, how strong is this case?
Disturbing accusations made in a lawsuit filed against Trinity University. The estate of former student Cayley Mandadi and her mother are claiming the university could have prevented her death back in 2017.
Also named in that lawsuit, Mark Howerton, the man accused of killing Mandadi. Eric Hernandez has...
So that's where we leave things, with a hung jury, a pending retrial, and a lot of questions. What do you think? The retrial is set to take place early 2022. Jet seems to have thrown a wrench into the prosecution's case while seemingly attempting to help, and there is a lot of ambiguity surrounding when all of Cayley's visible injuries occurred. Thanks to you all for stopping in and watching. My name is Kevin, and this is Just Thought Lounge.